Welcome to Sci-Fi Alien, where the boundaries of space and time are pushed to their limits. In today's story, a human and an alien species form an unlikely bond, defying every rule of nature. But when their union sparks a dangerous threat, can their love survive the judgment of the universe? Stay tuned, because the real question is, how far will they go to protect their family? The hum of the scout ship's engines provided a constant, reassuring backdrop to the tense silence that hung between Todd Mollister and his Vulpini partner, Adra. For weeks, they had been traveling through the uncharted sector, tracking a smuggler's trail and gathering intel. It was a simple mission, at least, that's what Todd had thought when he first boarded the ship. A reconnaissance mission, clear and straightforward, nothing out of the ordinary. But now, as they approached the third moon in the sector, everything was about to change. Todd glanced at the screens, watching the data as it scrolled by. His mind wandered, fixated on the alien woman sitting beside him. Adra, with her striking features, her fiery red hair that cascaded like liquid flame, her sharp amber eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness of space, was unlike anyone he had ever known. The Vulpini species was renowned for their incredible senses and their ability to track any target with precision. They were the epitome of professionalism and skill, but there was something else about Adra that kept Todd's mind racing. Something unspoken, something he couldn't quite place. "Adra," he said quietly, his voice breaking the stillness. "You ever get used to this?" He gestured toward the endless stretch of stars outside the ship. The silence, the isolation. Adra didn't immediately respond, her eyes fixed on the controls as she adjusted their trajectory. There was a moment of silence before she finally spoke, her voice soft but laced with an almost imperceptible hint of amusement. "I've never had the luxury of getting used to anything, human. But I suppose it's all a matter of focus." Her large fox-like ears twitched slightly as she turned her head toward him, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Besides, we're not alone in this universe." "Not truly." Todd frowned. "No? What do you mean by that?" Adra's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than usual, her amber eyes studying him intently. Then, without warning, she shifted in her seat, her posture more rigid than before. "You should prepare, human," she said, her voice taking on a new, unexpected tone. There was a weight to her words, something uncharacteristically serious. Todd felt a shiver run down his spine. "We're having puppies." Todd blinked, his mind immediately shutting down as he tried to process what he had just heard. "What?" His voice was a strangled whisper. What?" Adra turned toward him fully now, her lips curving into a small smirk, but her eyes were anything but playful. There was something in her expression, a mix of amusement and something deeper, something far more profound. "I said, we're having puppies. Hybrid pups, to be precise." Todd stared at her, his brain scrambling to make sense of the words. It felt like the entire universe had suddenly tilted on its axis. He had been expecting a briefing on the smugglers' activities, maybe some minor conflict on the surface of the moon, but this was absurd. "Adra," Todd said slowly, struggling to steady his voice, "this isn't funny. We're partners on this mission, we're not." "I know, human," she interrupted, her tone softening. She leaned back in her seat, her sharp features becoming unreadable. "I'm not joking. It's just how it happens with my kind." Todd opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His mind spun with 1,000 questions. Hybrid pups? How could that even be possible? And why him? Why this mission? Why now? His heart raced, and he looked at Adra, really looked at her for the first time, as though seeing her through a completely new lens. She was still the same calm, confident partner he had worked alongside for weeks, but now, she was something more. She wasn't just a soldier, she was a creature from an entirely different world, a being whose biology, emotions, and ways of thinking were foreign to everything Todd knew. How is that even possible? Todd asked, finally managing to speak. His voice wavered between disbelief and awe. You're an alien, Adra. I'm human. Adra's expression softened, her fox-like ears flicking back slightly as she considered him. It's possible because my species, the Vulpini, have adapted over millennia to mate with compatible species. It's rare, but not impossible. And it's not about us, it's about biology, something deeper than what you and I can explain. She met his gaze then, her ember eyes filled with something that almost looked like affection. It's happening because the connection between us is real. I didn't plan this. Neither did you. But now that it's happening, we must deal with it. Todd could only stare at her. The words she had just spoken didn't make sense, but the sincerity in her eyes, he knew she wasn't lying. This wasn't some elaborate joke or a test. The weight of her words began to sink in. He was going to be a father. To alien pups. Hybrid offspring. It was beyond anything he could have imagined, even in his wildest dreams. But we've only been together for a few weeks, Todd said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand. I don't know what this means. Adra turned away from him slightly, her hands delicately adjusting the controls of the ship as they entered the atmosphere of the third moon. It means we have a responsibility now, human. You and I. And whether you're ready or not, we're in this together. A silence fell between them, one that was charged with unspoken thoughts and a growing tension. Todd was caught between a sense of disbelief and something else, a strange, thrilling sense of destiny. He had always thought of himself as someone who controlled his life, his choices. But this felt like something entirely out of his control. And that scared him. But then again, there was something in Adra's voice that made him believe, just for a moment, that maybe he could rise to this challenge. Maybe this wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. The idea of being a father to hybrid alien pups, well, it was unprecedented, and terrifying, but in a way, it was also the most incredible thing that could happen to him. You're sure about this? Todd asked, his voice thick with emotion. Adra glanced at him, her face unreadable. For a moment, Todd thought she might say something else, something more comforting, but instead, she only nodded. Yes, human. I'm sure. Todd felt a lump form in his throat as the reality of it all began to settle in. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything, how their lives had just been irrevocably changed by this one revelation. His heart pounded in his chest, and despite the fear, despite the overwhelming uncertainty, he realized something. This was real. And no matter how bizarre, no matter how impossible it seemed, he had to face it. Adra's tail twitched against the seat, a small, almost imperceptible movement that reminded Todd of the connection they shared. She was right, they were in this together. And for better or for worse, they were about to embark on a journey that no one, human or alien, had ever been prepared for. Todd turned back to the window, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon of the third moon, the unknown path stretching before him. It was frightening, yes. but it was also exhilarating. And as the ship continued its descent, he couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead for them both. "Prepare yourself, Todd," Adra's voice came softly from beside him. "This is just the beginning." Todd's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the excitement of what was to come. He wasn't sure how he'd handle it all, but one thing was certain: whatever happened, he wouldn't face it alone. The moments after Adra's revelation felt like a fog had descended over Todd. He was still in disbelief, trying to wrap his mind around the impossibility of it all: hybrid pups, a bond across species, the responsibilities of parenthood that had been thrust upon him in a way he never expected. The ship's soft hum did nothing to calm his nerves. In fact, it seemed to amplify the silence between them, the tension thickening with every passing second. Todd turned toward her again, as if seeking confirmation, as if looking for some reassurance that this was all real. "Adra." "I didn't." His voice trailed off as he searched for the words, any words, that could make sense of this. "I know," Adra said, her voice quieter than usual, almost gentle, but there was a firmness beneath it. She didn't turn toward him immediately, her eyes still focused on the instruments ahead. But she could feel his gaze on her, the weight of his unspoken questions pressing down on the space between them. "It's unexpected for both of us. But it's happening. And we'll have to face it?" Todd swallowed hard, his thoughts racing. "We don't know what this means for either of us. What happens now? Is this some kind of fate? Or just—" "It's neither," Adra cut him off, turning her head slightly to look at him. "It's biology. It's nature, human. No different than the way your kind grows attached to someone. It just happens to be far more complex than what you might expect." Todd shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to make sense of her words. "Right, biology." He let out a shaky breath, trying to lighten the moment. "Just a little more complex than I thought. No big deal, right?" Adra's eyes softened, though her expression remained calm, almost detached. She had seen this reaction before in other species, though humans seemed to have a different kind of reaction when it came to relationships that transcended their usual boundaries. "For you, it is a big deal. And that's okay," she said, her voice unexpectedly tender. "But I need you to understand something: this is real. It's not a passing thing. This connection between us, this bond, it's something we can't ignore." Todd leaned back in his seat, his hands resting on his lap, fingers twitching nervously. "I know it's real. I'm just not sure how to deal with it." He looked at her, his eyes searching for answers. "I mean, how am I supposed to just know how to be part of something this alien?" Adra studied him for a moment, her piercing amber eyes scanning his face. There was something in her gaze that made Todd feel vulnerable, exposed in a way that he hadn't expected. "The same way you adapt to anything new, human," she said, her voice now softer, almost reassuring. "One step at a time." The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time in days, Todd let himself truly look at her. He'd always admired her professionalism, her precision, her calm under pressure, but there was something else, something deeper now. In the past, he had seen her as just a colleague, a partner in a mission. But now, he saw her as someone who was sharing her world with him, someone who had trusted him with something that could change everything. "I didn't expect this," Todd said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we were just here for the mission. Smugglers, intel, not this. Not us." Adra nodded, understanding. Neither of us expected this, Todd. But here we are. And now, the question is, what do we do about it? Todd felt his heart beat a little faster as her words sank in. He had been so focused on the mission, so wrapped up in the technicalities of the job, that he had never stopped to consider the human side of it. The emotions. The connection. And now that they were here, standing on the edge of something new and uncharted, he didn't know what to do. I guess, Todd began, his mind swirling, I guess I never thought about it that way. I've always been the kind of guy who tries to keep things simple, you know? Do the job. Keep emotions out of it. He let out a self-deprecating chuckle. It's a little harder to do that when your partner's an alien and you're about to have kids with her. Adra's lips curled slightly in amusement. That's one way to put it. But it's more than that, human. You and I, we're not just partners in this mission anymore. This bond between us, it's more than just physical. It's a connection on a deeper level. One that neither of us expected. Todd's chest tightened at the thought. He had known, of course, that there was something about Adra that was different, that he felt something more than mere professional respect for her. But now, with the weight of their situation bearing down on him, he couldn't deny the undeniable pull that had always existed between them. Do you feel it too? He asked, his voice quieter than before, almost unsure. Adra's gaze softened, and for a moment, the stern, controlled demeanor that had always been her hallmark faded. She turned fully toward him now, her eyes locking with his. I feel it. More than you know. The quiet confession hung in the air between them, and in that moment, Todd realized that he had crossed a line. There was no going back now. Their relationship, whatever it had been before, had shifted in ways he wasn't entirely ready for. But he wasn't sure he wanted to go back either. The connection they shared was undeniable. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, there was something in his chest, a feeling he couldn't explain, that made him want to be a part of it. I don't know what the future holds, Todd said, his voice steadying as he spoke. But I know one thing. Whatever this is between us, I want to figure it out. Together. Adra nodded slowly, her ember eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the cockpit. Then let's take it one step at a time. One step at a time, Todd. In the silence that followed, the weight of her words settled over him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Todd allowed himself to feel a sense of peace. They had no idea what was coming next, no idea how this would all play out, but for the first time, it didn't seem to matter. They would face it together. And that was enough for now. The ship continued its course through the stars, but Todd's mind was elsewhere. It wasn't on the mission anymore. It wasn't on the smugglers, or the unknown dangers that lay ahead. His thoughts were solely on Adra, on the unspoken bond between them, and on the future they were about to create together. As they flew deeper into uncharted space, he couldn't help but feel, for the first time, that maybe he wasn't as alone in this universe as he had once thought. The ship drifted through the void, its engines humming in the background as Todd sat in silence, staring at the view outside. The stars seemed to stretch endlessly, the vastness of space both comforting and suffocating in its enormity. Since Adra's revelation, he had been lost in a whirlwind of thoughts, his mind struggling to make sense of what had just been dropped on him. Hybrid pups. A bond that transcended species. A future with an alien, and, now, a family. It was more than anything he could have ever anticipated when he joined this mission. Adra sat beside him, her eyes focused on the controls, but there was a different energy between them now. The professional distance they once shared was slipping away, replaced by something deeper, something that both terrified and intrigued him. Adra, Todd began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of unspoken questions. He turned to face her, the flickering lights of the cockpit reflecting in her ember eyes. I've been thinking. About what you said. About the pups. I get that it's biological, but I don't understand how this can even work. I mean, hybrid children? I've never even imagined something like this could be possible. Adra's eyes softened, and she exhaled slowly, as if weighing her words carefully before speaking. It's not just about biology, Todd, she said, her voice quiet but filled with an authority that only she could carry. It's about the connection between us. The compatibility. My species, we've evolved to bond with others. To adapt and produce offspring with compatible species. It's rare, but not impossible. Todd's mind was spinning. I understand that part, he said, his voice tight. But what does it mean for us? I mean, what does it mean for you and me? You've been clear about this connection we share, but what happens now? Adra turned fully toward him then, her gaze intense but not unkind. It means that, whether we expected it or not, we're about to create something new, she said. And that's something we both have to come to terms with. You're human, Todd. I'm Vulpini. Our biology isn't supposed to mix. But it does. And now, we have a responsibility. Todd swallowed hard. The weight of her words pressed down on him like a physical force, the reality of their situation settling in. A responsibility, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. To who? To our species? Or to each other? Adra's lips curved into a faint smile, but it was laced with something deeper, something older. To both, she said simply. You, Todd, have just as much to give to our pups as I do. And it's not just about what we are. It's about what we'll become. Together. The words echoed in his mind, and Todd felt a surge of emotion. A deep sense of fear and awe filled him, mingling with a strange, unexpected warmth. He didn't know what was happening to him, but it felt like his entire world was shifting beneath him, and there was no going back. You're saying, Todd began, his voice shaking slightly, that this bond is more than just something we feel right now. It's going to shape us. And our children. Exactly, Adra said. This bond is deep. It's rooted in both of our species, and it transcends the physical. It's a connection of minds, of instincts, and of shared purpose. When two species are compatible like this, it's not just about a one-time union. It's a future we'll both have to build. Todd ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he hadn't noticed until now. And you're okay with this? He asked, almost afraid of the answer. You're okay with us? Adra turned to face him fully now, her ember eyes glowing in the dim cockpit light. I've had time to think about it, Todd. And I trust you. I trust that we can do this. I know it's a lot to process, but the truth is, I've never felt this right about anyone. Not ever. Her voice softened, a rare vulnerability showing in her words. I've never been with someone from your species. But I feel it, between us. This isn't just biology. It's something more. Something we both can share. Todd felt his breath catch in his throat. The weight of her words hit him like a wave, and for a moment, he found himself at a loss. Here was an alien, an entirely different being, and yet, in her words, in her presence, he found something he had never expected. A connection so profound that it defied everything he thought he knew. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "This is all new to me. I've never even considered the possibility of being a father to something that isn't human." Adra reached out then, her hand gently resting on his. Her touch was warm, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment of the ship. "You don't have to say anything, Todd. This isn't about words. It's about what we're willing to do for each other. What we're willing to give. You've already given me more than I ever expected. You're here, and that's enough." The sincerity in her words cut through the haze of uncertainty that had clouded his mind. Slowly, Todd nodded, absorbing the reality of what she was saying. It was clear now that this wasn't just about what he could do for Adra or their pups. It was about the partnership they had formed, something that had transcended the boundaries of species, of expectations, and had become something far deeper than either of them could have imagined. "How do we prepare for this?" Todd asked, the question heavy with meaning. "I mean, I want to be there. I want to be a part of this. But I don't know how to raise hybrid children, Adra. What do I need to know?" Adra's expression softened even further, her eyes almost tender. "We'll learn together, Todd. There's no manual for this, but that's part of what makes it so special. We'll figure it out, step by step. Just as we've done so far. Our pups will be born into a world full of possibilities, and we will give them a future full of love." Todd took a deep breath, the air in his lungs suddenly feeling heavy with the weight of responsibility. It wasn't just the unknowns that scared him, it was the fact that this was real. That they were real. And he wasn't alone in this. Adra's calm presence, her quiet strength, was something that he could lean on. Together, they would face whatever came next. "I'm ready," Todd said, his voice steady now. "Whatever comes, I'm ready to face it with you." Adra's smile deepened, and for the first time, Todd saw a warmth in her expression that made him believe, just for a moment, that maybe everything would work out after all. They sat together, staring out into the vast expanse of space, the weight of their future settling around them like a shared promise. It wasn't just about the hybrid pups they were about to raise, it was about the life they were going to build, together, in the uncharted territories of the universe. As the days passed, the gravity of what was happening between Todd and Adra grew heavier, settling around them like a persistent storm cloud. They had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The hybrid pups they were about to have were more than just a scientific anomaly, they were the embodiment of a new future, one neither of them had ever anticipated. And while there was a sense of excitement, an unspoken connection between them that had only deepened, there was also an undercurrent of fear that neither of them could shake. Todd found himself in a constant state of internal turmoil. The reality of his situation, the human male who was now the father of alien pups, was something his mind kept circling back to, unable to find a comfortable place to land. He hadn't been prepared for this, had never imagined that one moment could change his life so completely. He thought he knew himself, knew what he was capable of, but this was a whole different kind of challenge. They had both been through the emotional ringer since the revelation, each trying to process what it meant to be connected in this way. Adra, for her part, seemed calm, her usual stoic demeanor intact, but Todd couldn't help but sense the subtle shifts in her behavior. She was carrying the weight of something enormous, something profound. And yet, she wore it with a quiet grace, as if this was part of her nature, part of the Vulpini way of being. One night, as they sat together in the small, shared space of their ship, Todd broke the silence. He could feel the heaviness between them, the distance that was still there despite their growing bond. The fear that they hadn't quite addressed, that they hadn't fully confronted. "Adra," Todd began, his voice low and hesitant, "I can't stop thinking about it. About the pups. About how this changes everything." He looked at her, searching her face for some kind of reassurance, some sign that he wasn't alone in his uncertainty. "What if we can't do this? What if we're not prepared? What if I'm not prepared?" Adra's gaze softened, and she leaned back in her seat, her ember eyes fixed on him. For a long moment, she said nothing, her silence speaking volumes. Then, she sighed, the sound almost imperceptible in the stillness of the room. "You don't have to be perfect, Todd," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "You don't have to have all the answers. None of us do." She paused, her fingers twitching at her side before she continued. "This is uncharted territory for both of us. We're in this together. And together, we'll figure it out." Her words struck Todd like a bolt of lightning, sharp and powerful. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that everything would fall into place, but the fear still clung to him. The unknowns, the uncertainty, felt like a weight pressing on his chest. "I'm scared, Adra," he admitted, the vulnerability in his voice raw and unfiltered. "I'm scared that I'm not enough. That I won't be able to protect them. To protect you." Adra's eyes flickered with something like understanding, and she moved closer, her tail brushing against his leg in a gesture of comfort. "You're more than enough, Todd," she said softly. "You've already shown me that. You're here, aren't you? That's what matters. And that's what will matter when the pups are born." Todd turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of her words, the truth of them sinking deep into his bones. But despite the truth, the fear still lingered, gnawing at him like a constant companion. He had never felt more out of his depth, more uncertain of his place in the universe. "What if I fail them?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You won't," Adra said firmly, her eyes locking with his, unwavering. "You're not alone in this. We'll face it together. We have each other, and that's more than most can say." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling him out of the swirling storm of his thoughts. For the first time since this all began, Todd allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could do this together. The following days were filled with quiet moments, moments where Todd tried to adjust to the new reality of their situation. It wasn't easy, and the fear didn't go away, it never truly left him, but he began to see things differently. He saw how Adra's quiet strength grounded him, how her calmness in the face of the unknown was something he could rely on. He saw how she, too, was facing a future that no one had ever predicted, and yet she wasn't retreating. She was embracing it. As they continued their mission, gathering intel on the smugglers' activities, Todd began to notice the subtle shifts in their relationship. The physical distance between them, once comfortable, had now shrunk. They worked more seamlessly together, their actions almost synchronized. Todd found himself stealing glances at Adra more often, his heart fluttering each time their eyes met, the bond between them strengthening in ways that words could never express. One evening, as they prepared to land on a nearby planet to gather more intel, Adra spoke again. This time, her voice was quieter, her tone almost contemplative. "Todd," she said, her voice breaking the silence between them, I know you're scared. But you need to understand something. You and I, we're part of something greater now. It's not just about us anymore. It's about the future we're creating. Todd looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. I know, he said softly. I just don't know how to handle it. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Adra's smile was small but genuine, and she reached out, placing her hand over his. You don't have to be strong all the time, Todd. You just have to be there. That's all. You'll see. The rest will come. Todd felt something inside him shift, the fear starting to loosen its grip on him, just a little. He wasn't sure what the future held, no one could predict what would happen next, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He was in this with Adra. And together, they would face whatever came next. As the ship landed softly on the planet's surface, Todd looked out the window at the alien landscape stretching before them. The unknown lay ahead, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. The journey wouldn't be easy, but he knew he wouldn't have to walk it alone. And with that thought, he found the courage to take the next step forward. The days leading up to the birth of their pups felt like a slow march towards something inevitable, yet still so surreal. Todd could feel the weight of what was happening, but he couldn't quite fathom the enormity of it all. He had gone from the uncertainty of the unknown to the quiet certainty that something extraordinary was about to happen. The fear that had once consumed him had ebbed away, replaced by a deep sense of anticipation and, strangely, awe. Adra had remained calm, her usual composed demeanor never faltering. She had always been the steady presence, the one who anchored him through this whirlwind of change. But even she, in her quiet way, couldn't completely hide the excitement that now radiated from her. Todd had noticed it in the way she moved, in the softness of her voice when she spoke of the pups. There was a tenderness to her now, something that seemed to soften her edges. The last few days had been a blur of preparations, making sure the ship was secure, checking their supplies, and keeping an eye on Adra as her condition became more evident. But despite the growing signs, Todd found himself still grappling with the reality of their situation. He was going to be a father to hybrid pups, half human, half Vulpini. It was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The night it happened, the ship was silent, the only sound the gentle hum of the engines as they hovered above a remote moon's surface. Todd couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the stars, lost in thought. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had already changed forever. Are you okay? Adra's voice cut through the quiet, and Todd turned to see her standing at the doorway of their small quarters, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. Her ember eyes were warm, but there was something in them that Todd couldn't quite read. You've been staring out there for hours. Todd smiled faintly, standing up to join her. Just thinking, he said, his voice quiet. I don't know what to think, actually. This whole thing is. It feels impossible. Adra stepped closer, her presence calming. I understand, she said softly. But this is real, Todd. We are about to bring life into this world. A life that is a part of both of us. Todd's heart skipped a beat as the weight of her words settled on him. He stepped toward her, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out to touch her arm. I'm scared, Adra. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know what it's going to be like. Adra looked at him, her gaze steady and understanding. Neither of us knows what it will be like, she said. But I believe in us. I believe in you. We will figure it out, one step at a time. Before Todd could respond, a sudden wave of emotion washed over him. It was as if the universe itself had decided this was the moment. Adra's breath caught as she placed a hand over her stomach, her eyes widening in surprise. "It's time," she whispered. Todd's heart pounded in his chest as he rushed to her side. He could feel the shift in the air, the tension thickening around them. He had never imagined he'd find himself in this situation, never imagined he'd be here, now, at the beginning of something so miraculous, so unknown. His breath came in quick gasps as he looked into her eyes, searching for some sign of certainty, something that would guide him through the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "It's happening," Todd murmured, more to himself than to her. "I can't believe it's really happening." Adra smiled, though it was tinged with a kind of tenderness that Todd had never seen from her before. "You're not alone in this, Todd," she said. "I'm right here with you. We're in this together." As the hours passed, Todd found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. There were no words for the feelings he was experiencing: fear, wonder, joy, and a sense of inevitability all blending into one. The unknown stretched before them, but for the first time, he didn't feel afraid of it. He felt ready. Adra's labored breathing became more frequent, and Todd could see the strain on her face, though she never showed it outwardly. He held her hand, steadying her, offering what little comfort he could. "I'm here, Adra. I won't leave you," he promised, his voice low and sincere. She nodded, her fingers tightening around his hand. "I know." The minutes stretched into hours, and Todd found himself in a strange kind of limbo, torn between the overwhelming fear of the unknown and the powerful anticipation of what was to come. He had never experienced anything like this, but there was something profoundly beautiful about it. He was witnessing the creation of life, a new life that was a product of their bond, something that transcended the physical and touched the very essence of their beings. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a soft cry echoed through the room. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, more insistent. Todd's heart leapt in his chest as he looked at Adra, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's our pups," she whispered, a smile breaking through the exhaustion on her face. Todd's voice caught in his throat as he gazed down at the small, fragile forms that had been brought into the world. 4 tiny bodies, each one unique, each one a perfect blend of both their species. 2 boys, 2 girls. They were beautiful, more beautiful than he had ever imagined. One girl had his dark hair but Adra's fox-like ears. The other girl looked just like Adra, her fiery red hair gleaming in the soft light. One of the boys had more human features, while the other had a distinct vulpine structure, his small ears twitching as he let out a soft cry. Tears welled in Todd's eyes as he reached down to gently touch one of the pups, marveling at the miracle they had created. He had never believed in the impossible, but in that moment, as he held their child in his hands, he realized that sometimes the universe had a way of making the impossible a reality. "They're perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe it." Adra's eyes glistened with tears as she looked at him. "They're ours, Todd," she said softly. "We created them. Together." For a long moment, they simply sat there, together, in the quiet of the room, as their pups lay nestled between them. Todd felt an overwhelming sense of peace settle over him. This moment, this family, was something he had never expected, but it was everything he needed. And in the quiet of the room, with the tiny cries of their pups filling the air, Todd realized that he had found a new purpose. His world had expanded in ways he could never have imagined, and he would do everything in his power to protect this family, this life, that they had brought into the universe. He was no longer just a human on a mission. He was a father, and his journey was only just beginning. The birth of their pups, so miraculous and unexpected, was supposed to be a time of joy, a time for Todd and Adra to revel in the new life they had created together. But in the weeks that followed, the weight of their situation began to settle on them with a crushing force. Their union, their offspring, had become the subject of intense scrutiny, not just from the scientific community, but from the very species they belonged to, and that included the Vulpini, whose societal norms were as rigid as they were ancient. For the first time, Todd began to understand the true depth of what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. The pups they had brought into the world weren't just a miracle, they were a statement, a challenge to everything that had ever been accepted about interspecies relationships. He had known from the moment Adra's words had sunk in that their bond would be difficult to navigate, but the reality of it was beginning to hit hard. The universe, it seemed, had a way of judging even the most personal of connections. One morning, as they sat in the quiet of their quarters, Todd's gaze shifted toward Adra. She had been unusually quiet, her attention turned inward as she scanned the incoming reports from their mission. The soft click of the console was the only sound that filled the room, but Todd felt the tension building, like the calm before a storm. Adra, do you think the universe is ready for what we've created? Todd asked, his voice hesitant, unsure if he was even ready to voice the thoughts swirling in his mind. I mean, we knew there would be consequences, but I didn't think it would feel like this. Adra didn't look at him immediately. She let his question hang in the air, the weight of it pressing down on them both. Finally, she glanced up, her ember eyes meeting his with a quiet understanding that only she could offer. I knew there would be consequences, she said softly, her voice steady. But the pups, are not just a product of us. They are a reflection of both our species, of what is possible when we let go of the boundaries that separate us. She paused, her eyes darkening slightly. But that doesn't mean the universe will accept it? People, beings, don't like things they can't explain. And this, she gestured vaguely, this is something no one has ever seen before. Todd felt a knot form in his stomach. He had known what she was saying was true, but hearing it out loud made it feel even more real. Their relationship, something so private, so intimate, had now become public knowledge, a subject of debate and judgment. He had always believed in the idea of a person's worth being determined by their actions, not by the expectations of others, but now he was beginning to see just how difficult it was to live outside of the norms. I'm not worried about what the others will think, Todd said, his tone firm, but there was a tremor beneath his words. I'm worried about how we'll be treated. You know, there are people out there who won't look at us as a family. They'll see us as a threat. As an anomaly. Adra's face softened, her gaze thoughtful. Yes, she said, her voice taking on a reflective tone. I know. But you need to understand, Todd, this is not just about us anymore. It's about what we represent. And that's why it will be difficult. She looked away for a moment, as though considering something deeply personal. The Vulpini are a proud species. Our traditions run deep. What we've done, it challenges everything we've known. Todd's chest tightened at her words. So, what now? Do we hide? Do we just disappear? No, Adra said, her voice firmer now. We face it. We face it head on. There is no escaping the judgment of others. And we can't hide from what we've done. But we can stand together, Todd. We can show them that we are more than their fears. More than their doubts. Todd's thoughts swirled in confusion, anger, and determination. He had never been the type to back down from a challenge, but this was different. The idea of fighting for their right to exist as a family felt overwhelming. It wasn't just about his and Adra's relationship, it was about the future of their children, about what kind of world they were bringing them into. Adra seemed to sense his struggle, and she reached out, placing a hand on his. We have always known that we would have to fight for acceptance, Todd. This is just another battle in a long line of them. But we don't fight alone. Todd looked down at their intertwined hands, his mind racing. The road ahead seemed uncertain, but for the first time, the fear that had gripped him no longer felt like a prison. He wasn't just fighting for Adra or for their pups. He was fighting for their right to exist in a world that wasn't ready to accept them. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest fight of all. The moment was broken by a soft chime from the comms console, pulling them both back to reality. Todd's eyes flicked to the screen, where a new message had come in. It was from Commander TH, the leader of their reconnaissance unit. Prepare yourselves, the message began. Elder Natha of the Vulpani Diplomatic Council has requested an urgent meeting. It seems the news of your union has reached more than just the scientific community. The council has convened. Todd's heart sank. The council? The very heart of Vulpani tradition and authority. The very beings who could decide their fate. Adra's expression remained unreadable, though Todd could sense her own unease. She stood slowly, taking a deep breath. I knew this moment would come, she said quietly. The council will not take kindly to our bond. But it is time, Todd. We must face them. Todd stood as well, his hands clenched at his sides. He could feel the pressure building, the weight of the judgment they were about to face pressing down on him. It was more than just a legal or diplomatic issue, it was a personal one. It was about everything they had built together, everything they had created. We will face them together, Todd said, his voice steady. He met Adra's gaze, his expression firm with resolve. Whatever happens, we'll do it together. Adra gave him a small smile, her ember eyes reflecting a depth of emotion that spoke louder than words. Together, Todd, she said softly. Together. As they prepared for the meeting, a heavy silence settled between them. They both knew that the judgment of the Vulpani Council could change everything. It could tear apart the life they had just begun to build. But Todd no longer felt afraid of what they might say. The universe could judge them as it pleased, but they would face it with the same strength they had always shared. They were more than the fear, more than the uncertainty. They were a family, and nothing could take that away from them. Nothing. After the meeting with the council, Todd and Adra found themselves at a crossroads in their journey. The tension between them and the universe, represented by the Vulpani Council, was palpable, and the next steps were uncertain. But as they stood together, the weight of the council's judgment still looming, a new reality began to settle in for both of them. Their bond, their family, had already become more than just an extraordinary story. It was a symbol of something deeper, something that would challenge not only their futures but the very perceptions of what was possible. Todd couldn't deny the unease that lingered. The idea of returning to the council, the very heart of Vulpani tradition, felt like stepping into a storm. The powerful words from Elder Natha, the Vulpani diplomat who had seemed intrigued by their union, now weighed heavily on his mind. You've created an interspecies bond that no one, not even our legends, have ever seen before," she had said. The words echoed in his head, each one a reminder of the complexity of their situation. Yet, as much as he feared the future, he realized that their journey had already begun. There was no returning to what their lives had been before. No matter what happened next, they had chosen a path, together. Adra sensed his hesitation before he voiced it. They had been partners for so long, working together through the highs and lows of their missions, but this was different. This was something no amount of training could have prepared them for. "Todd," she said quietly, her voice cutting through his thoughts as she watched him from across their small quarters. "I know you're worried. But the universe doesn't get to define us. We define us. We've already created something incredible. And that is ours to protect." Todd looked up at her, the calm certainty in her voice offering him a glimpse of something solid in a world full of uncertainty. He had always admired her strength, her ability to stay grounded no matter the situation. But now, in the face of everything, it was her belief in their family that grounded him. He wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. "I'm not scared of the challenge, Adra," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions running beneath. "I'm scared of what it might mean for us, our family. The world doesn't exactly make space for relationships like ours. And I don't want to lose that, what we've built." Adra's amber eyes softened, and she took a step closer to him. Her presence, always so calm and measured, filled the room like a quiet storm. "The world never makes space for things it doesn't understand," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "But we don't need the world's approval, Todd. We only need each other. Our pups will grow up in a world that challenges everything they know, but that's a gift. The opportunity to show the universe that love, real love, has no borders. No boundaries. Just the willingness to accept and adapt." Todd exhaled, the weight of her words sinking into him. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy. It would never be simple to walk between two worlds, two species, both of which had their own expectations of who and what they should be. But Adra was right. They didn't need anyone's approval. Not when what they had was real. What they had was a family. "We don't know how this will turn out," Todd said softly, looking into her eyes. "But we're doing this together, right?" Adra reached out, her hand gently resting on his. "Together," she affirmed, the word a promise. "That's all that matters." The days after that conversation passed with a newfound sense of purpose. They prepared for whatever would come, but in the midst of the preparations, Todd couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in Adra's demeanor. There was something more to her now, something that went beyond the quiet strength she had always exhibited. It was a sense of peace, as though she had come to accept their new reality, no matter how difficult it might be. One evening, as they sat together on the observation deck of their ship, watching the stars outside, Todd turned to her, his thoughts lingering on the future they were about to create. "What do you think they'll say?" he asked, referring to the council once more. "Do you think they'll accept our pups? Accept us?" Adra didn't answer immediately. She simply stared out at the endless stars, her face illuminated by the soft light. When she spoke, her words were thoughtful, almost wistful. "I don't know, Todd. I don't know what they'll say. But I do know that the universe doesn't get to decide what our family means. We do." Todd felt a flicker of hope rising in his chest, the familiar doubt creeping into the edges of his thoughts being pushed aside by the force of her certainty. "I guess we're not just fighting for acceptance anymore, are we?" he asked, the realization dawning on him. We're fighting for something more. We're fighting for the right to exist on our own terms. Exactly, Adra replied, her voice steady. And I believe that, in the end, it's our hearts that will decide what matters. We may be from different worlds, but our family will always be what we make of it. And with that, something inside Todd clicked into place. There was no turning back now. Their path had already been set, and despite the uncertainty ahead, he felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't fighting for approval or for permission. He was fighting for the life they had built together, the future that no one could take from them. Their pups, though born into a world that might not understand them, would grow up with two parents who would do whatever it took to protect them. And that was enough. The universe could judge them. The council could question them. But nothing, no one, could change what they had. And so, as Todd and Adra stood side by side, facing the uncertainty of their future, they found strength not in the promise of the world's acceptance, but in the knowledge that their family, their love, was enough. They would face whatever came their way, together. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger, and the universe, for all its vastness and complexity, became just a little bit smaller. Together, they had found their place, and nothing could take that from them. The days following the meeting with the council were long, filled with a constant hum of preparation and anticipation. The weight of the judgment they had faced, the uncertainty of what their future would hold, hung heavily over Todd and Adra. Yet, despite the challenges they were about to face, there was a new sense of clarity between them. The bond they shared, the love that had once seemed so impossible, now felt like their anchor in the storm. They had found something in each other that transcended species, boundaries, and everything they had known before. For Todd, the enormity of their situation was still difficult to fully grasp. There were moments when the doubt crept in, when the weight of their decision, bringing life into a universe that wasn't quite ready for it, felt overwhelming. But in those moments, Adra was always there, a quiet strength beside him, a reminder that they were not alone. Their future was uncertain, but they would face it together, no matter the obstacles. One evening, as they stood together looking out over the alien landscape from the observation deck of their ship, Todd turned to Adra, his voice barely above a whisper. Adra, do you ever wonder if we're making the right choice? All of this, it's so much to take in. I feel like everything is happening so fast. Adra didn't answer immediately. She simply stood there beside him, her amber eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The silence stretched between them, comfortable yet heavy, filled with the unspoken weight of their situation. Then, after a long pause, Adra finally spoke. I do wonder, sometimes, she admitted, her voice soft but resolute. But then I look at our pups, and I know, this is right. We may not have all the answers, but what we have is real. What we have is ours. She turned to him then, her gaze steady. And I believe in us, Todd. I believe in you. Todd's heart ached at her words, a rush of emotion flooding him. He had never felt more vulnerable, but in that vulnerability, there was something freeing. He wasn't just living for himself anymore, he was living for something bigger, something that would shape the future of not just their family, but the world they were part of. You're right, Todd said, his voice thick with emotion. I keep thinking about the world out there, the judgment we're going to face. It's hard to ignore. But when I look at you, when I look at our pups, I know we've made something beautiful. Something that's worth fighting for. Adra smiled softly, her tail brushing gently against his leg as she took his hand in hers. The universe may not understand us, Todd. But that's not our problem. We've already defied every expectation. We've created something new, something that no one else has ever seen before. And that is something to be proud of. Todd nodded, his thoughts slowly shifting as the weight of her words settled in. He had always been a fighter, always been someone who faced challenges head-on. But this was a different kind of fight. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about carving out a place for their love, their family, in a world that wasn't ready for it. And as Adra had said, that was something worth fighting for. The days that followed were filled with more conversations like this, moments of quiet reflection where they explored what their future would look like. The challenges were far from over, and the judgment they faced from the Vulpini Council still loomed in the distance. But Todd and Adra had come to realize something important: they didn't need the approval of others to define their relationship. They had each other, and that was enough. As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, Todd found himself thinking less about the potential obstacles and more about the life they were building. Their pups, half human, half Vulpini, were a testament to the bond they shared, a bond that had already proven itself to be unbreakable. The love they had created wasn't just a love between two beings, it was a love that defied the very laws of nature, a love that had the potential to change the future of both their species. One night, as they sat together in the quiet of their quarters, Adra turned to him, her eyes thoughtful. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice tentative, "about the future, and what it means for us. For our pups." Todd looked at her, his expression softening. "What do you mean?" Adra took a deep breath, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the table. "I've spent my whole life following the traditions of my people. The council, the expectations, it's all been part of who I am. But now, with you, with our family, I feel like I'm creating something new. Something that doesn't have rules, doesn't have boundaries. Something that's just ours." Todd smiled, his heart swelling at the thought. "I feel the same way. We're writing our own story, Adra. And no one can take that from us." Adra's gaze softened, and she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Exactly. And that's why I'm not afraid anymore. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, we will face them together. We've already defied expectations. We've already created something extraordinary." Todd reached out, taking her hand in his. He could feel the warmth of her touch, the steady pulse of her heartbeat. This was real. This was their future. "We've got a lot ahead of us," Todd said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "But I know one thing for sure, we'll do it together." Adra nodded, her lips curling into a smile that made Todd's heart race. "Together," she repeated, the word a promise. "And whatever the future holds, we will embrace it. We will embrace each other. Because love, our love, has no boundaries." Todd's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, his mind filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. He had never imagined that his life would lead him here, standing on the precipice of a new world, with an alien woman who had changed everything he thought he knew about love. But as he looked into Adra's eyes, he knew that no matter what the universe threw at them, no matter what challenges lay ahead, their love would be the one thing that could never be taken from them. And that, in itself, was the greatest adventure of all. Side story. It had been weeks since Todd and Adra had faced the council, since they had taken the first steps into a world that wasn't ready for them, and since their lives had irrevocably changed. The council had begrudgingly accepted their union, though it remained a tense and uneasy truce, as if they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. But life, in its own unpredictable way, had found a sense of rhythm for them. Todd, once uncertain and anxious, now found himself embracing the reality of fatherhood, a father to pups unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Adra, as stoic and proud as ever, was growing more comfortable with the idea of raising a family that defied the very laws of nature. Yet, in the quiet of their ship, something new and unsettling began to stir. Todd was alone in their quarters, staring out at the dark expanse of space, his thoughts adrift on the unknowns of their future. The pups, now a few months old, were beginning to grow more active, displaying early signs of their mixed heritage. The process of raising hybrid children wasn't without its challenges, but Todd had grown to love every moment, from the sleepless nights to the overwhelming joy of watching their pups grow and discover the world around them. But, as the stars glistened like distant promises of the unknown, Todd couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. A sharp chime from the ship's console broke his train of thought. He turned, blinking as the screen flashed to life. It was a message from Adra. "Todd, meet me in the command center. Now." The urgency in her tone sent a shiver down his spine. He had never heard her sound so frantic. Todd's heart raced as he immediately stood, rushing to the command center. Adra was there, pacing, her fur ruffled in a way that was unlike her usual calm, controlled self. She didn't even notice him enter, too lost in her thoughts. "Adra." Todd's voice broke the silence, causing her to look up. Her eyes were wide with concern, a flicker of fear in them that Todd rarely saw. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice steady, but he could hear the tension beneath it. "I just received a message from the Vulpini scout ships. There's a fleet approaching, and it's not from any known faction. They're hostile." Todd's stomach dropped. He had never seen Adra like this before, her calm facade slipping, revealing the vulnerability that had been carefully hidden beneath the surface. "What do you mean? Who are they?" "I don't know," Adra replied, her voice tightening. "But they've been tracking us. They know who we are, Todd. They know what we've done." Todd's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle not yet falling into place. How could they know? "The council accepted us. We've been careful." Adra looked at him, her expression hardening. "It's not just about us. This is bigger. There are factions out there who won't accept what we've created. They believe that hybrid offspring of our kind are an abomination. Something that shouldn't exist. They're coming to erase it." Todd's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of her words sank in. The universe, which had seemed so vast and full of possibilities, was suddenly closing in around them. They weren't just facing societal judgment anymore, they were facing something far darker, something that could destroy everything they had fought for. "Where are they coming from?" Todd asked, his voice barely a whisper. "From the outskirts of the Vulpinian colonies," Adra replied, her eyes narrowing with focus. "They've been waiting for us to slip up. For us to reveal ourselves in a way they could use as justification for their actions." Adra's words struck Todd like a physical blow. He had always known the risks of their union, but the reality of an external threat, an actual, physical threat, was something he hadn't prepared for. He had been so focused on what was happening within their relationship, within their family, that he hadn't considered the wider consequences. But now, that larger world had come crashing down on them, and it was no longer just about survival, it was about protecting the future they had just begun to build. "We can't run from this," Todd said, his voice steady now, his resolve hardening. "We have to fight. Adra nodded slowly, her eyes meeting his with a new determination. "I've been waiting for this, Todd. I knew it would come to this. And now, it's time to protect what's ours. We will fight. For our family." Todd felt a surge of something fierce rise within him. He had never been one to shy away from a challenge, but this was more than a battle for survival. This was a fight for everything that mattered, for their pups, for their love, and for the future they had chosen to create together. The ship's lights flickered, an emergency signal flashing across the screen. Adra's ears twitched with sudden alertness as she quickly began to input commands into the ship's system. "They're closing in," she said, her voice clipped. "We have to act fast." Todd moved to her side, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle ahead was inevitable, and he knew that whatever happened, it wouldn't just be a fight for their survival, it would be a fight for the right to exist on their own terms. "We've come this far," Todd said, his voice steady. "We're not going to let anyone take that from us." Adra's gaze softened for a moment, her tail brushing against his leg in a comforting gesture. "No one can take what's ours, Todd. Not now. Not ever." As the ship powered up and the distant sound of engines echoed from outside, Todd felt a new sense of clarity wash over him. The universe had always been a vast, unpredictable place, but now, in this moment, he understood something fundamental. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for love, for family, for the very essence of what they had created together. The ship lurched forward, its engines roaring to life as it sped toward the approaching fleet. Todd and Adra stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Their bond was stronger than any weapon, stronger than any threat. And as they prepared for the battle ahead, Todd couldn't help but feel that, for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Their future, no matter how uncertain, was something no one could take from them. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.